Hi, I'm Ruby Grant, 30 years old, and I never imagined I'd feel like a stranger at my own family's table. But at my parents' 35th anniversary party, my brother stood up, raised his glass, and thanked them for raising their only child. Their only child. I was sitting right there, just 5 seats away, my plate untouched, my heart hammering. My mom smiled, her eyes sparkling like she'd just heard the sweetest truth. My dad nodded proudly, as if this moment had been rehearsed. No one flinched. No one corrected him. The room kept buzzing with clinking glasses and cousins laughing, acting as if I didn't exist. That wasn't just a toast. It was a declaration, a line drawn in the sand with my name erased. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box, and placed it on the table. "Don't open it yet," I said softly, my voice steady, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. Every head turned. My brother's grin faltered. My parents' smiles froze. They had no idea that box contained something that would unravel everything they thought they could hide. If you've ever felt rejected by your own family, pushed to the sidelines like I was, drop a 1 in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and share your story. And follow along. The ending of this story will keep you hooked. I'd spent years trying to fit into a family that never seemed to see me. Memories came rushing back, sharp and unyielding. They weren't just moments. They were proof of how long I'd been invisible. 2 years ago, I spent weeks planning my mother's 50th birthday. I'd saved up to buy Doris Grant a custom necklace, a silver pendant with her initials carved in delicate script. I wrapped it carefully, wrote a card about how much she meant to me, and drove 3 hours to Wichita to surprise her. When I handed it over, her eyes barely flicked to the box. "Oh, that's nice," she said, setting it on the kitchen counter next to a stack of napkins. My brother got her a new coffee maker, nothing fancy, just something he grabbed last minute. She spent the whole dinner gushing about how it made her mornings perfect. My necklace? Never saw it again. I checked her jewelry box months later. Not there. Then there was Shane Grant's big promotion party last summer. He'd climbed the ladder at his finance firm, and the family threw a celebration at a local steakhouse. I found out from a cousin's Instagram post. Smiling faces, champagne flutes, my parents beaming like they'd won the lottery. I wasn't invited. Not a text, not a call, not even a casual mention. When I asked my father, Lawrence Grant, about it later, he shrugged. "Thought you were busy," he said, then switched the subject to Shane's new corner office. I wasn't busy. I was home, scrolling through photos of a celebration I didn't even know existed. The worst came a year ago, when I lost my job as a freelance graphic designer. Bills piled up, and I was drowning in late notices. Swallowing my pride, I texted my parents asking for a small loan, just enough to cover rent until I got back on my feet. I sent the message to our family group chat, the one Shane always dominated with his work updates. No reply. Not from my mother, not from my father, not even a sorry or check-in later. I sent a follow-up. Then another. Silence. A week later, I saw my mother post a photo of Shane's new car, a sleek sedan he'd bought with their help. I stared at my phone, the unanswered texts glaring back at me, and felt something harden inside. It wasn't just the big moments. It was the small ones too, the ones that cut deeper, because they were ordinary. Like the time I called my mother to share that I'd landed a big client, my first real break in months. She listened for 10 seconds before saying, "Hold on, your brother's on the other line." She never called back. Or the family barbecue, where my father spent an hour bragging about Shane's latest deal without asking me a single question. I sat there, smiling, nodding, playing the part I'd always played, while my stomach twisted. Then came the rumors. A few months before the anniversary party, my cousin Bailey Vaughn pulled me aside at a coffee shop. She looked uneasy, stirring her latte too long before speaking. "Your parents told everyone you don't want to be part of the family anymore," she said quietly. "They said you're too busy, too independent." I froze, my coffee going cold in my hands. Me, the one who'd spent years calling, texting, showing up with gifts and hope. Bailey said my mother had been telling relatives I'd checked out, that I didn't care about them. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a story they'd crafted to explain why I was never around when the truth was they'd stopped inviting me. Then there was Curtis Ford, another cousin, who texted me out of the blue a week before the party. "Heard you're done with us," he wrote, half joking, half curious. "Your brother said you don't come to family stuff anymore." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Shane had said that. The same Shane who got every spotlight, every cheer, while I was left scraping for a glance. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my phone's gallery and scrolled through the screenshots I'd saved over the years, texts I'd sent my parents, begging for a response, asking for help, sharing pieces of my life. All ignored. One from last winter stood out. "Hey, Mom. Dad, I'm really struggling.
Can we talk?"
Sent. Read. No reply. Right below, it was a photo of them at Shane's holiday party, all smiles, posted the same day. All of that hit me at once as I sat in the dining room in the middle of my parents' 35th anniversary celebration. A long oak table stretched across the room, covered in crisp white linen and piled high with silver platters of roasted chicken, glazed carrots, and creamy mashed potatoes. Crystal chandeliers hung above us, their warm light catching vases of roses and lilies, deep reds and whites that glowed like they were meant to steal the spotlight. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter spilled from every corner. The buzz of conversation felt almost alive. I sat at the far end, squeezed between an aunt who hadn't said a word to me all night and a cousin's new boyfriend who kept fumbling my name. Shane stood at the head of the room, posture tall and confident, his suit sharp as a blade. He was the center of everything, pulling every eye his way like a magnet. My mother leaned toward him, her face bright with a pride I'd never known. My father rested a hand on Shane's shoulder, smiling wide and steady, as if I wasn't sitting right there. No one asked about my life. No one noticed my full plate or how my hands stayed folded in my lap. I'd spent years perfecting the art of fading into the background, smiling just enough to dodge questions, pretending I belonged at this table. The chatter flowed around me, cousins swapping stories about their kids, aunts gushing about recipes, uncles arguing about football scores. I was a ghost, my presence barely a whisper in the room's warmth. Shane, though, soaked up every glance and every laugh, his voice slicing through the noise like he was born to command it. I watched him work the crowd, his gestures smooth, his charm effortless, and felt that familiar ache of being overlooked, not just tonight, but for years. When he raised his glass, the room went silent. His voice was polished, the kind people naturally leaned toward. "To the two people who shaped me," he said, turning to our parents with a smile that felt rehearsed. "The best parents anyone could ask for." Glasses lifted. Soft murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe just this once he'd say my name. Maybe someone would turn toward me. Maybe I'd be acknowledged. But then Shane's grin widened, his eyes gleaming with confidence. "And thank you for raising the best only child in the world." The words struck like a stone shattering glass. I held my breath, waiting for someone, anyone, to laugh, to correct him, to say, "What about Ruby?" But my mother raised her glass higher, her smile tight and unwavering. My father chuckled, nodding as if this was a script they'd all rehearsed. The room erupted in applause, cousins and aunts cheering, their voices blending into a wall of sound that swallowed me whole. That wasn't a slip. It was a choice. They weren't forgetting me. They were erasing me, rewriting our family in a way that didn't include me. My pulse pounded, my chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. I didn't let my face betray the ache tearing through me. I sat there, hands still in my lap, staring at the untouched food on my plate. Shane kept talking, his voice carrying over the clinking glasses, joking about some childhood memory that of course only featured him. My mother laughed, brushing his arm. My father nodded, eyes fixed on Shane like he was the only one worth seeing. Bailey, sitting across from me, glanced up for a split second before dropping her gaze. Curtis, a few seats over, shifted uncomfortably, his fork scraping against his plate. The cousins' chatter picked back up, but it felt distant, like static humming in my ears. I'd always known they favored Shane, but this was different. This was a public declaration, a line drawn in front of everyone we knew. The laughter, the cheers, the clinking glasses, they weren't just celebrating my parents' marriage. They were celebrating a family that didn't include me. I gripped the edge of my chair, my knuckles white, but kept my expression steady. I'd spent years swallowing this feeling, pretending it didn't hurt. But tonight, it was sharper, clearer. This wasn't about forgetting. This was about choosing to leave me out. And as I sat there, surrounded by their voices, their smiles, their world, I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. Something was shifting inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet resolve. I wasn't going to let them write me out without a fight. Sitting at that table, with laughter and clinking glasses washing over me, I felt the weight of Shane's words settle like a stone in my chest. The best only child in the world. His toast echoed in my mind, my mother's smile, my father's nod burning right alongside it. The room was alive, but I was finally done being invisible. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing the cool surface of a small box wrapped in silver paper, tied with a red ribbon. This wasn't a gift in the way they'd expect. It was something I'd pieced together just days before, after a cousin's offhand comment about family finances sparked my suspicion. I'd spent hours digging through old emails and papers, uncovering a truth I hadn't fully realized until then. Now it was time to let it speak. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood, and the chatter faltered. Every eye turned to me, some curious, some confused. Shane's glass paused midair, his grin twitching. Doris's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. Lawrence's brow creased, like he was trying to place me in his story. I walked to the center of the table, my steps slow and deliberate, and set the box down in front of my parents. "Don't open it yet," I said, my voice low but steady, cutting through the hum of the room. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. The box held something they'd buried for years, and I wasn't going to beg for their acknowledgement anymore. I turned and walked toward the door, my pulse racing but my face calm, leaving the box behind like a ticking clock. I'd barely reached the hallway when I heard Doris's voice, sharp and impatient. "What's this supposed to be?" she demanded, and I knew exactly what was coming. Against my warning, they tore into the silver paper, the ribbon falling to the table. A gasp cut through the room, followed by a low murmur that grew louder, angrier. I paused at the doorway, glancing back. Shane leaned over the table, face pale, sifting through the papers inside, letters from a lawyer, emails, financial records I'd uncovered after that cousin's hint. They laid everything bare. Doris and Lawrence had quietly transferred the family's entire estate to Shane, cutting me out without a word. No discussion. No notice. Just a decision made behind my back. Doris's voice broke, half shout, half whisper. "This is a mistake," she insisted, shoving the papers toward Lawrence. He grabbed them, hands shaking, eyes scanning the words as if they might change under his gaze. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered, but the room wasn't listening. Bailey, sitting nearby, stood abruptly, her chair clattering. "You did this without telling her?" she demanded, voice sharp with disbelief. Curtis, a few seats over, shook his head, muttering to the cousin beside him. The guests' murmurs turned into a chorus of questions and accusations, faces twisting with shock and judgment. An aunt I barely knew pointed at the papers, her voice rising. "How could you cut your own daughter out?" she shouted. Others nodded, whispers growing to shouts. Shane slammed his hand on the table. Glasses rattled. "This is private," he snapped, his voice cracking with panic. Doris clutched the papers to her chest, eyes darting around for an ally. "You don't understand," she said, tone desperate. "We were protecting the family." But no one bought it. A cousin I hadn't seen in years leaned forward, voice cold. "Protecting who exactly?" he asked, leaving the question hanging. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, fingers pointed, the celebration unraveling like a dropped thread. My parents' faces went ashen, excuses drowned out by outrage. Shane tried to speak, but his words were lost in the chaos, his charm powerless against the truth. I didn't stay to watch it all fall apart. I stepped through the doorway, my step steady, the sounds of their arguments fading behind me. The box had done its job, not to win apologies, but to show them what they'd done. Those papers had been found by chance, a careless email forwarded by a relative who didn't understand its significance. But I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about erasure. Years of being pushed aside, finally laid bare. I walked into the cool Wichita night, my breath visible in the air, feeling lighter. Not because they'd changed, but because I'd stopped waiting for them to. The chaos I left behind wasn't my burden anymore. They'd opened the box, and the truth was theirs to face. The anniversary party faded in my rearview mirror, but the weight lingered. The box, the papers, the truth. There was no going back. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line was stark: cease and desist. My hand steadied as I opened it, though my pulse quickened. The letter, signed by a lawyer representing Doris and Lawrence, demanded I retract the documents I'd revealed at the party. They called them misleading, accused me of causing emotional distress and disrupting family harmony. They threatened to sue if I didn't comply, claiming I'd fabricated evidence to smear them. The words stung, but not because they hurt. They were a desperate attempt to bury what everyone had already seen. I wasn't surprised. I'd expected them to fight back, to twist the narrative, just like they always had. I didn't reply. Instead, I called a lawyer I'd met through a freelance client, a woman named Karen who specialized in family law. I laid out everything: the papers I'd found, the emails, the lawyer's letter from my parents. Karen didn't flinch. "They've got no case," she said, calm but firm. "Those documents are airtight. You're entitled to your share of the estate." By the end of the week, we had filed a lawsuit against Doris and Lawrence, demanding my rightful portion of the family trust. The papers I'd left in that box, letters from their lawyer, emails outlining the transfer to Shane, financial records showing the estate's value, were my leverage. I'd stumbled across them just before the party, thanks to a careless email from a distant relative who hadn't realized what they'd sent. Now they were my weapon. But I wasn't done. Sitting at my desk, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the screenshots I'd saved, texts I'd sent my parents years ago, begging for help when I lost my job, asking to talk when I was struggling. Each one unanswered, ignored, a digital record of their neglect. I'd held on to them, not knowing why until now. I drafted a post for Twitter and Facebook, careful but deliberate. I uploaded a screenshot of one text: "Hey Mom, Dad, I'm really struggling. Can we talk?" Sent. Read. No reply. Below it, I shared a single page from the financial records, redacted to protect specifics, but clear enough to show the truth. My parents had funneled everything to Shane, leaving me nothing. My caption was simple: "This is what it feels like to be erased by your own family." I hit post. My hands were steady, my heart racing. The response was immediate. By morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Friends from Wichita, old classmates, even strangers shared my posts, flooding the comments. "That's awful. How could they do that to you?" one wrote. Another said, "You're not alone. My family did something similar." The post spread beyond Wichita, picking up thousands of likes and shares. A local community group reposted it, calling out the hidden family secrets that hurt the ones who deserved better. I watched the numbers climb, each share a crack in the perfect image my parents had built. Doris called that afternoon, her voice sharp. "You're humiliating us," she said. "Not asking. Not apologizing. Take it down." I didn't argue. I didn't beg for her to understand. "You made your choice," I said, calm but firm, and hung up. Shane texted an hour later, "This is low, even for you." I didn't reply. Lawrence stayed silent as always. Their anger didn't shake me. It confirmed I'd hit a nerve. The truth wasn't just mine anymore. It was out there, seen by hundreds, then thousands. Carla Newman, my closest friend since college, showed up that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. "You're tougher than they'll ever know," she said, her smile warm but fierce. She'd been there when I lost my job, when my parents ignored my calls. Now she sat with me, scrolling through the comments, reading the ones that made us laugh, the ones that made us pause. Vernon Tate, another friend who had always been more family than my own, called later that night. "You did what you had to," he said, steady. "Don't let them make you doubt it." Their support wasn't just words. It was a lifeline, pulling me through the storm of my family's backlash. By the next day, the story had reached local news blogs. A small Wichita outlet ran a piece. "Family dispute goes viral, sparks debate on fairness." My parents' friends, their church group, even their neighbors started pulling back. Bailey texted me, hesitant. "I didn't know it was this bad." "I'm sorry." Curtis stayed quiet, but I saw he'd unfollowed Shane on social media. The family's polished image was crumbling, unraveling with every share, every comment. They'd spent years painting me as the one who didn't care. But now the truth was out, and no amount of excuses could cover it. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The lawsuit was moving forward, and Karen was confident we'd win. The social media posts weren't about revenge. They were about taking back my voice. I'd been silent too long, letting their lies define me. Now the world knew I wasn't the one who walked away. They were. 6 weeks after my post went viral, the courtroom ruling came down like a hammer. The judge didn't hesitate. The documents I'd presented, letters, emails, financial records, proved Doris and Lawrence had wrongfully excluded me from the family trust. The estate, built from decades of my parents' savings and investments, was ordered to be split equitably. I would receive my share, a portion substantial enough to change my life. I hadn't done it for the money. I'd done it for justice, to force them to face what they'd done. The news spread through Wichita like wildfire, whispered in coffee shops, shared in church groups, posted in local forums. My parents' carefully crafted image, the perfect couple, generous pillars of the community, crumbled under the weight of their own choices. Shane took the hardest hit. Shane's polished reputation as the golden son unraveled online. Comments flooded his social media, calling him out for benefiting from an unfair deal. "How do you sleep knowing you took everything from your sister?" one stranger wrote. A former colleague posted, "Didn't know you were that kind of guy, Shane." Even his finance firm's clients started asking questions, and I heard through a mutual friend that he'd lost a major deal because of the family drama. Shane tried to defend himself with vague posts about private matters, but it only fueled the fire. In Wichita, people don't take kindly to favoritism, especially when it's splashed across Twitter for all to see. His charm, once his greatest asset, couldn't save him now. Doris and Lawrence didn't fare much better. Friends who'd clapped so eagerly at that anniversary party began pulling away. Their church group, once a weekly gathering of warm smiles and potlucks, stopped inviting them to events. A neighbor I barely knew messaged me, saying she'd overheard Doris at the grocery store trying to justify why they'd cut me out. "It's for the family's future." But the friend had just walked away, shaking her head. Lawrence, always quiet, stopped showing up at his usual golf outings. Their social circle, built over decades in Wichita, shrank to a handful of loyalists who didn't ask questions. The rest turned their backs, unwilling to be tied to a scandal that had gone public. Even cousins who weren't directly involved distanced themselves. Bailey sent one last text. "I don't want to pick sides, but I wish you well." I didn't reply. Curtis unfollowed Shane on social media and stopped attending family gatherings. In a small city like Wichita, where everyone knows everyone, guilt by association spreads fast, and they weren't willing to carry that weight.